Hi, my name's Jason, and this is going to be a reading slash review slash rant because that's really what these are. It's not a refined analysis, but rather my unfiltered thoughts, my unfiltered opinion on a poem by W.B. Yeats, The Second Coming. Okay, I'm reading it to you. It's in my old college textbook, the Norton Anthology of English Literature, Volume F, 8th edition. Okay, the 20th century and after. So this was, I read, published, put out to the world in 1919. Okay. And I'm just going to begin with a reading, like I said, and then we're going to go over sort of my analysis rant of it. Okay. And there's the word gyre in the first line of the poem. Now, the word gyre is very much intertwined. Yeats took this word upon himself and incorporated it into his own philosophy, his own philosophical viewpoints. And I believe in terms of Yeatsian philosophy or whatever, it's pronounced gyre or gyre, maybe gyre. So we'll be pronouncing it gyre, okay? Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold, or the century cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. All right, so upon just a couple of things to throw out there that are going to help you with this reading, okay? I first read this, I believe, in Modernism, and if you're taking Modernism, which I believe was a 300 level English course for me. I believe, that could be wrong, but that's irrelevant. But I read it for Modernism, okay? And some things, oftentimes authors, they love to do this, especially T.S. Eliot loves to do this. He'll tell you about it in tradition and the individual talent. They make allusions to other works of literature. To help create imagery, to show their learnedness, to show their bookish nature, if you will, to show that, that besides being a practitioner of poetry, they're also a consumer of poetry and literature and culture, okay? And oftentimes it helps with creating metaphor and, just painting the picture the poet would like to reveal, illustrate on the canvas. That is the paper. So the first line, turning into, even backing up before that, the second coming. Okay, so if you think about, backing up even before that. So works that will help you with an understanding of this poem and literature and poetry in general. You're going to want to have an understanding or a loose understanding. You don't have to be an expert in these things. Of course not. I'm certainly not. Okay, certainly not. Greek mythology, okay, especially old authors or, authors of ancient Greece, authors of even stuff in modernism, okay? postmodernism as well. They're, like I said, they're going to make allusions, they're going to reference Greek mythology, stories from Greek mythology, gods from Greek mythology. You know, they're also going to reference the Bible, okay? Have a loose understanding of the Bible, of biblical stories, the Old New Testament. Read the King James Bible. That's what was recommended to me. Have I read the King James Bible? Hell no. Have I read all about Greek mythology? No. I just, from reading Homer and the Iliad, or I don't believe I certainly didn't read all of the Iliad, but the Odyssey, a little bit of it, Odysseus, that's going to help you, okay, with an understanding of the text. So then getting into it. You have to think World War I ended 1918. Okay, that's when World War I ended. This was published a year after the conclusion of World War I, when the world is in mourning. The world is in pain and suffering, and millions have died, and resentment is building. Resentment is fostering what will become a violent climate in Europe and in Germany, certainly. A resentful, bloodthirsty climate, rather, okay? So the second coming obviously alludes to the second coming of Christ, as, I think in the book of Revelations eventually gets at the second coming, and God comes and ushers in the New World Order, and he casts judgment, okay? But in Yeats' vision of the second coming, we have something much, much different. It's not the second coming of God, okay, but something different, as we will get into as we go line by line through this poem. So turning and turning in the widening gyre. So there's a footnote from my text. Yeats' term, in relation to the word gyre, Yeats' term pronounced with a hard G for a spiral means, it means for a spiraling motion in the shape of a cone. He envisions 2,000-year cycle of the Christian age as spiraling towards its end, and the next historical cycle as beginning after a violent reversal. The end of an age, which always receives the revelation of the character of the next age, is presented by the coming of the gyre to its place of its greatest expansion, and of the other to that of its greatest contraction. Okay, Yeats' note. So that was a note of Yeats explaining his sort of philosophical understanding of this term gyre, which he incorporates to his poetry. There's also another word later in the poem, Spiritus Mundi, which comes directly from Yeats' own deconstruction of all these religious and philosophical views, and in producing his own, like I said, philosophy about the world and about where we're heading in the world. So turning and turning in this widening gyre, gyre, right? Gyre, yeah, right, sorry, gyre. I got confused. It's a lot to keep track of, okay, in my head. So turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. The falcon cannot hear this ostringer, this falconer, okay? It's lost inside this spiral, inside this gyre that is essentially a track of human civilization. At the beginning, you have the greatest, the smallest opening, the greatest contraction, okay, which alludes to the start of an age. At the end, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, or towards the end, it gets, wider and wider and wider, until the 2,000 years is up and a new age is begotten. A new age is ushered in to being. Okay, so the falcon has got separated from the falconer in the midst of this chaos because a new age is coming. It can no longer find itself back to its owner, or to its master rather, to the falconer. Things fall apart. The century cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. Okay, so we have apocalyptic imagery, okay? A blood-dimmed tide is loosed. And, the center falls apart. The foundation of civilization that is holding us up, that props us up, that gives us meaning internally, but also, externally, existentially, has provided a foundation for the world, Christian, and what this is, as the blood-dimmed tide is loose, the line, the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The ceremony of innocence, baptism, collapses in on itself and is drowned by this blood-dimmed tide, I guess, or just collapses. Because what we see, and this is the first reference maybe to religion, to Christianity, God is dying. God is dead. As Nietzsche tells us, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche tells us in The Gay Science, written in, I believe, the 1880s, published in the 1880s sometime. And don't quote me on that. I know it was published in the late 1800s. Okay. Late 19th century. I apologize about the wind. I'm on top of a mountain. It's windy. Okay. Just to throw that out there. Nietzsche tells us in The Gay Science, in the madman parable, that essentially a madman is running around the marketplace proclaiming, God is dead. God is dead. He comes across some people, not sure who, and he tells them, and we have killed him. We are his murderers. We have killed our own father. We have thrown away God. We have thrown away the value system that, and the morals that have sort of been commonplace, but also dictated behavior and dictated life, and the path that people have followed. The path has been erased, essentially. And so secular society is moving towards a more secular viewpoint and way of living, okay? So, and Yeats knows this. Yeats was very much aware of Nietzsche, read Nietzsche, and and in the madman parable, I believe there's a lantern, or the madman's holding a lantern, and I believe the lantern goes out. Maybe he drops it and it breaks. And very much like Yeats envisions, this ushers in a darkness. A new darkness is come over the world. And you would think with all these technological advancement, in the 20th century, and the Industrial Revolution and technological revolutions, and standard of living is certainly better, than it was, and people are living longer, and it seems the modern man seems to been afforded certain luxuries that, that people in the past, people in ancient societies were not. However, ideologically, or, within your thought process, people were very much bound to meaning by religious texts, not just Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, whatever it is. People were very much bound to meaning, and also, there was a foundation laid by religion. And now that has gone out of the window as society is moving towards a more secular way of living. So, as we will see, Yeats believes this death of God is ushering in the apocalypse, okay? So the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all and I love this line, these lines. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And my cliff note in my book says the poem was written in January 1919, in the aftermath of World War I, in the Russian Revolution, in the eye of the Anglo-Irish War. Okay, so like I said, we're in the aftermath of World War I. Certainly the landscape, the cultural, socio-economic landscape seems very much in shambles. There is an air of the apocalypse around this time. And you see T.S. Eliot very much allude to this in The Wasteland, okay? So this is a common theme found throughout modernism. Modernism has to deal with the grappling of becoming the modern man, and what that means, and anxieties and trepidation having to do with living in a rapidly changing world. Okay, so this is very, very much a modernist text. Okay, so the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. The best people during this time lack all conviction because they recognize, around themselves that the passionate, or that we're living in uncertain times. And during such uncertainty, demigods, if you will, will rise up and will take people such as this that have thrown away the idea of God and are now looking for a new thing to follow, a new leader, a new God to follow. They're searching for meaning in a new God, and this allows the people who are full of passionate intensity to rise up. Mussolini, Mussolini. If I dare utter his name, Hitler. Okay, these people are demigods among people who are looking for a new God to follow. Okay, so the best are nihilistic. The best people in this life, in this time period, are nihilistic, while the worst are full of passionate intensity and chasing ideology to, grant their lives meaning, and also corralling people to follow a cult of personality. You see that very much in politics today, a cult of personality, okay, that will have people totally ignore policy, totally ignore the actions that are being taken behind the scenes, because the personality is so bold and colorful and glimmering and glistening and whatever adjective you want to use to describe like this cult of personality. It distracts people from the actual policy that is screwing the working class, screwing the people that voted for this cult. Yet again, not to get into politics, as my last video, but how do you not, okay? Because that's what authors do so great. Authors who are great, their works become ubiquitous. Shakespeare's Hamlet and Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet are almost ubiquitous within society. And the author disappears, and you just know that, two lovers killed themselves because their parents didn't want them to be together. Sorry, I'm going off on tangents because this is about Yeats, all right? So now on to surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. So here we get, surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. The first reference of the second coming. However, as I mentioned, this is not the second coming of Christ. This is not the biblical understanding of the second coming. So the footnote says in reference to the second coming, Christ's second coming is heralded by the coming of the beast of the apocalypse or Antichrist. All right, so, and, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yes, we have this point now that we've reached in the gyre, okay, that where at its greatest expansion, at the death of God, we have a contraction and a new age is beginning, and which brings about at the second coming, which reveals to us what the second coming will be led by, what will cast judgment upon the world, okay? What we will worship, essentially. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. And Yeats tells us Spiritus Mundi is the collective unconscious, the collective cultural unconscious, the collective unconscious of everyone. So Yeats draws from this collective unconscious, which allows him to tell us or paint a picture, illustrate what it is the second coming is going to be about, what beast is going to usher in the new world order, okay? And so this vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in the sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. So you have a bird, right? Or it's troubles my sight somewhere in the sands of the desert. So in the sands of the desert, in this, desolate, barren wasteland, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a sphinx almost, a sphinx very much. So it's neither a beast nor a man completely, rather they're intertwined, okay? So, and what I interpret that as, you have humans, okay? Humans are now worshiping demigods. Humans are taking on God status. And in this, they're undergoing a type of metamorphosis where they're from, the chest up, they're a man, but if you could only see what's behind them, it is a ugly beast. They are not entirely man. They're not driven by, well, I don't know, but So we're worshiping, some hedonistic version of man, some perverse version of man, okay? Troubles my sight. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Bethlehem being the birthplace of Christ, okay? So we know since it's heading to Bethlehem, it's flying, it's making its way to Bethlehem, this body shaped like a lion and head of a man, the Sphinx, is heading towards Bethlehem to be born, to then usher in the New World Order. And 20 centuries of stony sleep, so 20 centuries of an age dominated by religion, dominated by the belief in God, were vexed to sleep. And now we're vexed to nightmare by the rocking cradle of this new beast. One night we were sleeping soundly, and the thunder and the vibrations of this rocking cradle were felt across the spiritus mundi, almost, the cultural landscape, and, turn sweet dreams to a nightmare. And this is very much apocalyptic imagery. This sounds like the apocalypse. This sounds like this new world order that is being ushered in will bring with it the end of times. Okay? And that's the conclusion of the poem. The last lines of the poem ends with a question. It ends with a question mark, okay? I think Yeats is asking, right here. I know the text is backwards. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? I think the question is, what is this creature that we are now worshiping? What now dominates the thoughts, and what are our actions, predicated on? What is dictating our actions? And I think we're worshiping ourselves, and we're worshiping these demigods. We're worshiping, you see this today, we're worshiping celebrities as though they've achieved a type of God status. So, and our society, Western society, is very much dominated by celebrity culture. Of course, the 1950s, 60s, the late 20th century is dominated by movie stars and TV stars. Now we have the age of the influencer, where, people like Charli D'Amelio and whoever, are known by the entire world. But I guess sort of, what value are they bringing to society? What are they teaching the youth? Are they teaching the youth about the importance of the exam in life? Are they teaching the youth about virtue and what virtue means? And deconstruction and, whatever, humanity, empathy, or are they doing dances on TikTok? Of course, it's not all bad. I certainly am a victim, not even a victim. I watch YouTube, TikTok. Of course, I'm on the effing internet, but at some point, after you've been scrolling on TikTok for 2 hours, 3 hours, and you're you went from crying to hysterically laughing to being depressed. You have to wonder, like, how these new demigods, these new gods of our culture, these people that are receiving wealth and popularity for, posting videos on an app that are amassing cult-like followings, how are these 30-second clips and almost like addiction to these clips, how is it affecting us? How is it affecting culture? And of course, after Yeats' poem, 20 years after Yeats' poem, September 1st, 1939, we have the beginning of World War II. Okay? We have the beginning of World War II. Hitler tries to kill off anybody, of course, the Jewish population, but anybody who does not match his vision of, who should procreate in the new world. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, fair skin. And, he accelerates his efforts in killing off the population. I'm Polish. Auschwitz was in Poland. And to think about my ancestors, just being subjugated and tortured, imprisoned for their race, for their ethnicity, over an ideological viewpoint is obviously disgusting. Now, religion, of course, there were many religious wars. I think this is somewhat human nature to, if we don't understand one another, and we're not willing to understand one another, we may begin to perceive one another as threatening. And where you go from there, and also if someone is not willing to swallow our viewpoint whole, oftentimes we go on the attack. But this is about the poem, obviously. I rant. That's what I said these videos are. So I think all in all, you have an age where what Yeats does is he incorporates his own philosophy and his own understanding of the world and of religion to suggest that, the religious era is dead, has died. And now what is happening is the apocalypse is being, covertly or not so, or not so covertly brought upon us. And of course, following the publication of this poem, yes, World War II, but you also have the development and the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Correct here. I know it was Hiroshima, but yeah. So, it's a good poem. I think it's going to be up to you to decide what Yeats envisioned as this Sphinx-like character that is ushering in the New World Order. But I certainly enjoyed this poem. When I read it for modernism, there was a prompt to write about the apocalypse motif in Yeats' poetry, and of course I chose the Second Coming to write about. I think it's just it's certainly a good read, and hopefully you enjoyed my analysis of Yeats' The Second Coming. All right, thank you.